This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Hey guys, welcome back to Derezzed on clownfishtv.com. This is Neon, and we're going to talk about the animation industry in this week's episode. And it's going to be a spicy one. We have Fresher Luke on, and he is a veteran of the animation industry wars. So it should be a good time for all. So stick around. All right, guys, welcome back to Derez. This is Neon, and joining me this week is Mr. Fresher Luke. It is Mr. correct? I'm not assuming your pronouns.
Well, I mean, technically, Luke, in that context, Luke is my last name, so it'd be Mr. Luke, but sure, why not?
Okay, all right. So Fresher Luke, you may know him from Twitter and lots of Twitter battles that he's been in with the lovely animation community. But
oh yes, those wonderful people, so nice.
Right. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about his experiences in the animation industry, and in talking to you before we started recording, you worked on a lot more shows than I was even aware of. So if you can give people kind of the rundown of your experience.
Oh my God. It's such a long list. So I guess the TLDR of who I am, I guess.
Yeah.
So yes, hello, my name is Fresher Luke. I'm sure you can figure out what my real name is because I did such a bad job of concealing my identity on Tumblr. But I'm a 20-year veteran in the animation industry.
Oh,
so that's 10 years in Australia and 10 years here in the United States. I've worked at all the major studios, Cartoon Network, Disney, DreamWorks, Warner Brothers, Titmouse, a few others that are escaping my memory. And I've worked on a whole bunch of shows as a storyboard artist. Ben 10, BM Puppycat, Steven Universe, but I only did freelance on that. Gravity Falls, Justice League, Adventures Trapped in Time, the direct-to-DVD movie, which was actually pretty good. What else? Nico and the Sword of Light, a whole bunch of others. And now I am an animator in exile as I have been excommunicated from the animation industry in Hollywood, and I'm now independent.
That just like blows my mind because you have such an impressive.
Well, that's just a sliver. There's probably like way more that I'm forgetting, but yeah.
Every time we have animators on, and people, it's so weird. Like, fans listen, either animation or comic book people, and they're like, "Well, how come they got this wrong?" And they don't remember that project or the name of this thing or whatever because it's like super important to me. And I'm like, when you work in an industry like this and you're working at such a breakneck pace, it all blurs together. So it's just like work.
Yeah. As time goes on, it does a little bit, but sometimes, I recall stuff and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that thing when we did that in this particular scenario. But so usually when people like ask me specific questions, I'm like, oh yes, I remember that. But if you ask me just a straight blanket question, like what are all the things you worked on? I'm like, just a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it's like I guess somebody working at like an advertising agency or something being like, hey, what are all of your clients? Do you remember this one particular client from 15 years ago that only had like one or two little projects for you? Why don't you remember that? Because I remember that. I know that came from your agency and you worked on it. I'm like, I don't know, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
We did, right?
I'd assume so.
Yeah. So
apparently we're on a stream together years ago, according to you. So.
Yeah, that was and I'm trying to remember the stream because I actually don't stream, but I know because we had talked about, we were talking about how you talked about being an animator in exile, and this was when the whole Comicsgate thing was just kind of starting.
Yeah.
And you were musing that there really wasn't an animation industry equivalent to that, where a bunch of exiled creators kind of got together and did their own thing.
Yeah. Looking back on it, that probably makes a lot of sense. Animators and comic artists do have a lot of overlap, but animators seem like a special breed of cat that you can't herd. So, yeah, well, it makes sense. So
they don't want to join you in exile. That's
probably it. Yeah.
But it's weird because you've been very vocal about it, but I do know that there are some other people that you don't really get like fired per se. The phone just doesn't ring anymore, right?
Yeah, you get quietly fired.
Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, well, we just, because of budgetary constraints or economic headwinds or whatever, we're just not calling people back. But so what is your take on the current state of Western animation? Again, that's a very big question to ask.
Well, very big question with a very big answer. It's basically dead, Neon.
Oh, geez. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the podcast. See you, folks.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. I answered everything. No, I mean it's you've been watching it. You seem to be like the only cultural pundit, young geeky, to be really talking regularly about what's going on in the animation industry, which is bizarre to me, but kind of makes sense considering my low opinion of other cultural pundits I won't talk about.
So I think this is, I've thought about this. I mean, part of it is that we do have some experience with it, not in the trenches per se, but we did, years ago, we had, some couple of shows option. We were talking to people, whatever. We do know some people in the industry. But I think it's weird. It's kind of like, it's almost like a blind spot. And I think that a lot of people that they feel comfortable talking about, Star Trek or Star Wars or literature or even comic books. For some reason, animation to a lot of people still kid stuff. Does that make sense? Like video games are more adult, but they view cartoons as being kid stuff.
Well, that's bizarre to me because they'll view cartoons as kid stuff. We'll just take a little segue to criticize all those pundits.
Oh no. Now here they all come in the comments.
Yeah, they could come in the comments. I don't give a fuck. Fuck those guys. Right. But you say it's kid stuff, and I kind of agree with what you're saying there, but in the same breath, they'll turn around and they'll complain about how localizers are screwing up anime. And anime is just animation. It's just done in a different country.
Right.
But for some reason, they seem to have this bizarre phobia about talking about American animation. They're happy to talk about Japanese animation in the context that it's being changed by localizers. And they're happy to talk about it if, say, anime, I don't know, let's say worst case scenario, quote unquote, woke stuff or political stuff starts getting imbued into a lot of Japanese content, right?
Right.
They'll talk about it then, but if you want to talk about it happening in animation, they might mention it briefly, just if it's a slow news day, but aside from that, they'll just forget about it. And it's really bizarre to me. I don't know why they have this strange prejudice. Animation has like a bigger audience than comics.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And I mean, I get games because games is obviously like the biggest industry. It's like $1 billion industry, but you wouldn't have games if you didn't have animation. You know what I mean? Like animation, You need animators to help make games. And it's really weird to me why that is the case. I don't know. I mean, American animation has had such a huge history on like the cultural psyche of America, ever since Disney, put out Bambi and Snow White, and yet they just don't. Maybe they'll mention the good old days of Disney when he was alive, but aside from that, they just don't really seem to care. And I guess partly because they just aren't really interested in researching what's going on in the industry. And I guess unless you've lived it, like you and I have, it's kind of obscure to them. So
yeah, it's strange because I'm man enough to admit that I never stopped watching cartoons. Like I've always been a huge fan of animation and anime and comic books. I never really stopped watching it. Like even Cartoon Network. I was fortunate enough that we had our kids young, and I kind of went right from watching cartoons myself because I enjoyed them to now I'm watching cartoons with my kids and watching a lot of the same shows. And, we were watching kind of the renaissance of Cartoon Network, from Powerpuff Girls on that, they had these really great shows for a while. And then we kind of watched the quality decline over the years. But I have really fond memories. I was talking about Adventure Time earlier today, and I have great memories of watching Adventure Time with my kids when it first started. because I was trying to explain some of the jokes that like, okay, this is from D&D and this is from this and this is from that. And this is, I was trying to like explain to them this, and they're just kind of like, and they were, pretty young at the time. They're looking at me like, what? But that was the show that like my son literally like grew up watching Adventure Time, and his baptism by fire with YouTube was we together did a review of the last episode. And his criticism as someone who literally grew up watching the show was it didn't feel like a proper send-off for this show. It felt rushed and it felt just tonally uneven. And he was like, this didn't seem like the ending. And it turned out it wasn't the end because they were going to do a bunch of movies and stuff. But oh my God, that was the most downvoted video I think we've ever had. I think it was like only 45% upvotes on that one. It was really bad. And because all the cartoon stands found us. So that's when that's when we first realized that, like, okay, something is very, very wrong with cartoon Twitter.
That
they attack.
We're definitely going to get into that.
They attack children. I mean, he was only like maybe 13, 14 when he did that video.
Holy heck.
Like, oh
my
my God.
And that's Squid King, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well,
yeah, and he almost didn't go back to YouTube because of that. He's like, I don't want to go back. It's horrible.
Yeah.
These people.
I don't blame him. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's the thing too. Like I don't think that, again, I'm not trying to drag anyone, but people get upset about the video game industry and the stands in the video game industry or in comic books or, Star Wars stands or Disney stands or whatever. And I'm like, none of them hold a candle to the weird ass shit I've seen with animation stands. I mean, it is hands down.
Shall we exchange stories?
We can, but I would like to know why. I guess I'm trying to figure out. Like, I have literally. I mean, I'm not being facetious. I've actually tried to look into why animation fans, more so than other fandoms, tend to be toxic. They tend to be the way they are, and I'm kind of coming up short on that. I don't know if you have insight.
I do.
Luke, please.
All right. Well, here we go. So you talked about Adventure Time.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, Adventure Time was kind of like patient zero for everything we're seeing today.
Yeah.
So I got to LA, I think around 2010, which was when Adventure Time was basically getting started and started airing. And of course, there's whole stories about how the whole debacle about Adventure Time's production pipeline and how Penn, when they first started production on Adventure Time, Penn hired all of his friends and they were all useless, so he had to fire them all, and then he had to hire a bunch of new people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, Adventure Time's going. The first season's great. Everybody's loving it. We know the story about how when they put out Adventure Time toys, they just flew off the shelves, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember. I tried to get those for my kids. And
yeah,
it was like,
I was there when it happened. Everyone was raving about it in the industry. We were like, oh my God, that's amazing. And that's because, the first couple of seasons, Adventure Time was serialized. It was kind of like Dexter's Laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
They have the setup, Finn and Jake in this treehouse. They go out on adventures, and then the next episode, it all resets. And, that's perfect. I think, and that's kind of what led to a lot of its popularity. They knew who their audience was. It was a show for young boys and general audiences. Girls could probably get into it as well because, the designs were cute enough. Mm-hmm. But the main character was a boy, and he has his best friend as a dog who can shapeshift. And, basically you could pretty much print money at that point.
Yeah, it's Peabody and Mr. Sherman with swords and D&D.
D&D.
Yeah,
and it's cute. Good
chiptunes, 80s music. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, and when the pilot aired, everybody was really receptive to it. They really liked it. When things went awry, and this is my opinion, was when Pendleton Ward, and let me just be clear, preface this, I have no ill will towards Penn. For the handful of times that I've met him, and I've even had dinner with him one time. He's not a malicious person. He has no malevolence within him. I didn't detect any of that. He generally seems like a generally kind person. But on the flip side of that, to be an animation showrunner, being nothing but a kind, get along kind of guy isn't very conducive to making a very good show in the long term. You kind of got to be a little bit tough to once again herd the cats in line and make sure they do what they're supposed to do. And so because Penn's such a shy and quiet and kind guy, he's obviously, by extension, he finds it very hard to meet and talk to women, right? Because he's a straight dude. And so when he found out about a particular artist who went by the name of Rebecca Sugar, again, this is my opinion. Don't take it as fact. Take it with a grain of salt. He found out about Rebecca Sugar. I think it was like her thesis film came out. I forget what it was called, but it was a dude who had like I guess you could say his bedroom in like his chest or something, and you could see into infinity, like putting two mirrors together. It was really weird, but it was really well animated. And so he was like, "Oh, female animator. Oh, I'll hire her." And so he hired her on for storyboards. And of course, because she was all the way out on the East Coast in New York at the time with her boyfriend, Ian Jones-Quartey, that sort of, I guess, set it up for her because, she was very talented at the time and her boards were pretty good. And so, obviously Cartoon Network was like, "We love your stuff. We'd like for you to pitch a show." And she pitched Steven Universe, which I did freelance on the first, I think it was like 3 episodes on the first season. And in my opinion, the reason why cartoon stands, this is a long way around to getting to my point.
Okay.
The reason why cartoon stands are the way they are now is because when Rebecca Sugar started Steven Universe, and then when they started going into the second season, that was around 2016 or 17, which is when all of this stuff started to permeate within the culture. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, she obviously is, because women tend to follow the trends, she started to implement that into Steven Universe. And in my opinion, that is what radicalized the cartoon base or the fan base of that thing, because that same fan base also went on to support Star Versus and Owl House and other kind of shows in that vein as well. And it just permeated from there.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
That's one thing I noticed. It seems like you get the same people kind of migrating from like one show to the next, and then if that next show doesn't meet their expectations or standards or whatever, they eat the showrunners alive.
But because Rebecca and other female showrunners are female, there's this weird thing I noticed in America. It's like the minute you are some kind of young female, everyone gives you a pass, and you can basically choke a bitch and not go to jail in public in front of cameras. That's just my opinion.
They're definitely. I mean, like as an older guy, there are some double standards.
There's definitely some. All right, that's probably a more measured way of putting it, but that's just my opinion.
So I'm going to be more measured about it.
Sure.
Yeah, there are definitely some double standards. In, like, for example, I could not choke a bitch on camera. Being a straight white dude in my 40s, that would be the end of me. Yeah,
I agree, but I think we need to bring it back. Anyway.
Okay. Just certain bitches.
Just certain bitches. Mainly
that's
female.
a gender neutral term, by the way.
It is.
Yeah.
But no, you are right. They do tend to go from show to show, but the way it works is that, Rebecca built that, I guess, that fan base that she radicalized through the content. And generally when young people get radicalized, they stay radicalized until something massive happens in their lives and they realize that they've been going along with a farce. And then
bills bills happen. and communism and Marxism doesn't look as hot, huh?
But for like the first 10 to 20 years, up until until they reach like 27 or 30 or something, they're just completely they are completely indoctrinated into that particular ideology. And then, Rebecca is friends with, say, someone like Dana Terrace, who had the Al Hal show, which I would say is also an incredibly woke show. It's basically her poor man's version of anime Harry Potter. And so all the fans, because Adventure Time's over, all the fans are like, well, we need something new to sort of help maintain this message for us to continue to believe in the quote-unquote truth. And so there she is, and it just goes on from there. And then from there, I'm pretty sure Vivzy Pop got a lot of that fan base as well.
Yeah, I don't know if she wants those fans though, because they're all turning on her now.
But that's the double-edged sword about these kinds of fans. It's like, sure, they can be loyal up to a certain point where you say one or do one wrong thing, and then they will turn on you like a cur dog. So I've had to deal with them as well. Like, God, the number of stories of me dealing with these kinds of maniacs is insane, because they've said all kinds of crazy things about me and made all kinds of weird accusations. Oh,
they do. It's so weird. Like, they don't even think much of it. They're just like,
oh no, they don't.
You're a racist or a homophobe, and because of this one thing you drew that 20 years ago.
One thing you wrote because some idiot was too stupid to approach you, and now you're a pedo. Ha ha ha. At least I don't groom kids in public. I'm like, yeah,
I know, right? There was one showrunner, I can't remember who it was, on Netflix, and she was like proudly boasting about following a 14-year-old boy.
Oh yeah, Julia Vickerman. I love that story. And they always forget it whenever they come after me, and I'm like, oh wait, have you heard of this?
Literally, like if only his mother wasn't there. If only his mother wasn't there, but I got to see his lips bite into that, his beautiful lips bite into the apple. I'm like, oh yeah, this is purely innocuous. This is just you wanting to help this kid find his way around the park. Yeah, I was like, that is freaking weird.
With her boyfriend, by the way, who enabled it, by the way.
Oh my God,
another weak male. So
I'm just like, I mean, this is the thing, because look, I mean, politics aside, inclinations aside, it does seem like, at least until currently, that for the longest time, for about 10 plus years, the Western animation scene was locked down. It was basically a group of friends and their friends and their friends, and they all kind of came in and set up camp and started taking a bunch of corporate money to put out fanfics and webcomics, big budget.
You have no idea how correct you are, Neon. It really, when I was there, it really did feel like I was not part of a club. It was definitely a club at Cartoon Network, and one where they decided who they got to work with and who got fired and who got hired. Like one example, I remember there was this artist named Helen Jo. She's the partner of Calvin Wong, who's the current showrunner of We Bare Bears, who was also a weak male, but he used to be my roommate. So Helen got a job on Cartoon Network. Oh, cool. What do we? Oh, yeah. We'll get to that.
The eulogy for Cartoon Network. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. But Helen got work on Steven Universe as a board artist as well, and she got hired full time. She wasn't like doing freelance, and they basically I guess she just didn't fit in because she was she was there for like a hot minute, and then they kicked her out. And I asked her like, what happened? And she's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what happened. And at the time, Helen was like very much, I'm going to say abrasive personality for lack of a better term, but she was very headstrong, and she didn't really take shit from anyone. You know what I mean? She was very independently minded. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it. And they, Rebecca just kind of wanted, to hire quote unquote nice people who were just nice all the time. And then there was the other case with Lauren Zook, who I get confused with a lot, who did actually get fired from Steven Universe. And she kind of went through the same thing I went through many years later when I was at Disney TVA, of like, she either got bullied or she just got burnt out or something from the office politics, because she basically just had to nope out of that whole situation.
That's so weird, because you do see a lot of the same names. Now, I mean, look, it's not unusual. I know I was thinking back to a conversation I had a couple of years ago with John Celestri, who worked for, and he said there weren't a whole lot of animators in Hollywood at the time. So like a lot of the same people work on the same things again.
Sure.
But it's different. Like those people, they were a lot of times apprentices, or they, started right out of school, and it was always understood that it was a business. The people that worked at Disney back in the day, it was, Don Bluth and stuff. They went into the business of making cartoons. You work your way up the ladder. You start out as like, what, I don't know, like an in-betweener or something like that. And you apprentice yourself, you work your way up the ladder. Eventually you maybe get to be a director or something after years of paying your dues. You work your way through the system. Right.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like just in the last, 10 years, we had a lot of people that were like, look, take the money if you can get it. Right. I don't want to say that up front, but we had a lot of people that were put in charge of multi-million-dollar budgeted animation series that did not work their way through the system. Exactly. They just happened to know somebody. And I have to wonder if, the executives on some level were just like not paying attention or what. Because I remember like when Cartoon Network started doing new stuff back in the day, it was a chore for Frederator people to like talk them into doing new cartoons, my understanding.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Because it was a huge risk, because it's, animation's expensive. People don't realize how expensive it is. And they're like, yeah, we're going to do some new stuff, but it's not going to be a disaster. We're going to do good stuff. We're going to, do the, what was it? The cartoon, the shorts they did to kind of prototype different ideas like Powerpuff Girls and
So
cartoons or whatever it was.
So there was a shorts program at Cartoon Network, which was actually headed up by a man named Phil Rinder. Do you know about him? Yeah.
I know of him. I don't know him.
So I used to know him pretty well. He has since obviously changed as a person. But back in the day, he was actually the one that was implementing a lot of these initiatives at places like Cartoon Network. It started at Cartoon Network, like the Cartoon Network Shorts program. And then when he went to Nickelodeon, there was a Nickelodeon Shorts program. Cartoon Network obviously stopped doing it once he left. Phil started out on Adventure Time as well as a character designer, and then he sort of switched careers in the industry to becoming a producer. Okay. I guess because he realized that, animators basically get ground up and spat out, whereas producers tend to just hop around and make lots of money. And he had, he was married, he had kids on the way, and he was like, I just want to buy a house and provide for my family.
Imagine that.
Yeah, and but he did it this easy way, the sleazy ways, and being a producer really changed him as a person from when I first met him. But yeah, for a brief period they were doing new stuff. Barely anything really came from it though, so I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah, so then all of a sudden we had this like I don't know, spending spree going on from like after Adventure Time, and I think you're correct about Adventure Time being kind of patient zero, and it did start out as a show for kids. But then it was like the floodgates were open for more, basically, webtoons. And Ian Jones, I know he came from webcomics, originally. So we had like a lot of that. I guess that kind of sensibility. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because that's what we did. That's how we kind of started, was doing webcomics. Sure. But that sensibility coming to Hollywood, and a big, massive budgets being thrown at effectively animated versions of what should have been like a Tumblr webcomic. And it just seemed like the whole attitude changed. And we did have a lot of adult fans, watching animation, but then it seemed like they kind of lost the plot, at least from my point of view, because I was watching a lot of these shows with my kids at the time. And it seemed like they lost the plot from being like they're kids shows that happen to appeal to adults to these are shows for adults that just happen to be on a kids network.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think Regular Show is a great example of that.
Yeah, I love Regular Show, but I'm like, this should have been on Adult Swim. I mean,
it totally should have been.
Especially the early episodes. It was like, man, this stuff is really pushing it for
Cartoon Network. And like JG is like an old school stoner, so it's like, of course, it was going to be nothing but stoner comedy. But, But no, that is right. Yeah, it's around the same time. 2016, 2015, 2016. I think Obama had just. I think what really kicked it off was when Obama like legalized gay marriage. Because I remember specifically when it happened, everyone was in these studios were just like celebrating, like, "Yay, gay marriage!" And I think that was the point where they're like, well, if gay marriage is legal now, we can do whatever we want. It's a new world. We can show the world that everyone's gay and you should be gay, and and now here we are today. Look how well it worked out for everybody. The industry's in tatters. People are being laid off. No one can get any work. And
yeah, that's where I kind of want to leave with it. And I'm not necessarily saying that that one thing led to another, but I do believe that parents and children were basically chased off of Cartoon Network and even Nickelodeon to some degree. It does seem like parents were just taking their dollars elsewhere. And a lot of these shows, people bust on us, having grown up in the 80s and 90s, people were like, oh, your cartoons back then, they were just giant toy commercials. I'm like, yeah, bitch, where'd you think the money came from to pay for the cartoon? The reason the cartoon's on the air, the reason these people had jobs is the toys sold incredibly well. They were commercials and people stayed employed because of it. Like, you have to have something to sell. You have to have either a massive number of people watching your show that you get the advertising revenue. And we know that's not the case because linear TV has been declining. Or you have to sell the shit out of merchandise. And Adventure Time actually had both of those things at the start when it appealed to kids. Those first couple of seasons,
exactly.
The toy, like you said, the toys, we had to buy. I remember we bought our kids Adventure Time plushies and we could not find them at retail. We had to go to a comic convention and we paid 3 times as much for them.
Wow.
But they wanted, my son wanted a Finn and Jake really bad, and my daughter wanted bubblegum. So we had to pay $30 or whatever the hell we paid for these tiny little 7-inch plushies. But the stuff was selling like crazy. But then, like you said, Steven Universe came out, and I remember the figures came out. Yeah, they had the McFarlane Mega Blocks, and they were on clearance within, I swear to God, a month.
I remember that video you made about showing it.
Sat there. They just sat what? Nobody wants the Greg Universe deadbeat van playset. Oh my God. And that, what toy? I mean, this is Todd McFarlane was making this stuff, right?
I know. Didn't it nearly put him out of business or something?
What was he thinking? Okay, so what are we gonna make toys of? Okay, well, we have a bunch of space lesbians that combine kind of like Voltron, and we've got this
combine like Voltron, but sexually.
Yeah, they basically how Voltron, how the cat goes on to the other cat's leg, the one cat sticks its leg up the other cat's ass, and that's how they form Voltron. Okay, well, imagine a lesbian putting her head between another lesbian's legs, and then they form Voltron. It's like that. It's just like that.
And then they put
money
on
in the bank.
And then they put on a trench coat and pretend to be one person, right, Neil?
It's like, yeah. Can you imagine that? But probably what they did is they probably said, hey, this is because these toys are made years out, right? They have to make the deal a year or two out. So they probably went to Todd McFarlane. They're probably like, hey, Adventure Time toys, those sold really well, and you missed out on that, Todd. Here's the next Adventure Time. It's Steven Universe.
Yeah, that's probably exactly probably what happened. He was probably like, all right, sure, yeah,
sure, I like that. I spent $3 million on a baseball. Who the hell? We'll see what.
Well, I gotta pay the bill somehow.
Yeah, this is what the kids are into. It doesn't matter if I think it's stupid. This is what the kids are into. So yeah, they probably. And I have to wonder if the executives, whoever the bosses are at Cartoon Network or whatever, I'm like, did they just go along with it because they didn't know any better or what? Well, I mean, if I got some of the pitches for these shows, right, I would be like, yeah, this is an okay idea for a comic book. This is an okay idea for a graphic novel, whatever. I'm not throwing hundreds of millions of dollars in animated series of your fanfic. I'm sorry, it's not happening.
No, well, the thing with Steven Universe, it's such an interesting test case. Because, well, here's my theory, and I think this theory was floated. I forget where it was, but it was floated many, many, many years ago online, and it kind of rings true. And it seemed, I think, what happened was when Rebecca first pitched Steven Universe. Obviously, Steven was based on her brother, who was also Steven. And so she was thinking, oh, okay, because at the time it was all about boy shows. Because Adventure Time was kicking off. Executives are always like, how can we sell this to boys? Boys like action figures. Because back then they knew, what demographic liked what and when. Right. The thing back then, they couldn't figure out how to sell merch to girls. And because girls tend to go for more fashion and clothing and dolls.
Right.
Well, they did back then. And, and that's partly why there was a brief period where there was action shows like Young Justice and Tron and they all got canceled within like 1 or 2 seasons of them airing, despite their popularity, because
Tron was good.
Tron was really good. I really liked that show. And I think the other show was Motor City, which actually did a lot better, but Disney totally screwed those guys over. So anyway, Rebecca's like, okay, well, I'll make a boy-centric show. So, Steven is the main character. He's a boy. Boys can they can identify with that in some way, or they can, do what boys do and want to be that thing. And,
but also he's his mother.
Yeah, well, as
spoiler,
as part of the timeline, yeah, that was in later seasons where everyone was just like, oh, well, let's bring in trans allegory. Why not? That's a whole other theory that I'm gonna get into in regards to Steven Universe. But and so she was like, well, I'm fine with having the boy as the main character, but I want to have some strong female characters around them. And on its premise, sure, that makes sense. He's young, he's trying to learn, and then there's like these 3 knowledgeable aunts, like the 3 fates, and they're trying to teach him and blah 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 blah, and that's cool. And that was originally I was really interested in working on Steven Universe because I thought it had a lot of potential, and the characters seemed really interesting at the time. And again, it was the same kind of treatment. Rebecca was like, sure, we can give you a little bit of freelance, sort of try to test me out, so to say, before they commit to the bit. And my whole interactions with them were really strange. They were just they acted incredibly smug is probably the best way I can put it. Like somehow they've got some kind of weird power over me. And I was just like, at the time, I didn't think of it, but looking back on it, I was just like, these people are really weird. I was just interested in I was interested in working on a very interesting show at the time, because up until that point, I'd mostly been working on like script-driven shows like Ben 10.
Yeah, but I'm sitting there thinking like, but you're the veteran. I'm not trying to be a dick here, right? But you're the veteran, and they just got to Hollywood, and you've been working there for decade plus before that?
Well, no, I mean technically we all got there at the same time. But,
okay.
But the other thing I noticed is if you mention that you've worked 10 years before in another country, for some reason it just doesn't register in their minds. They're like, oh, well, you're new then. It's like, no, I've already been doing this. And the other thing is like they kind of put me, because the first show I worked on was Ben 10. They put me in this weird little box saying I was just the action guy. All I could storyboard was action, even though I had like, a 380-page graphic novel at the time that I wrote and drew myself. And yet they still couldn't make that weird connection. They were just more than happy to put me in this little box and not allow me to escape it in any way, shape, or form, even though I was like very good at doing all kinds of other stuff. So it was weird.
I don't know. I mean, people... I've been in companies like that too, and sometimes it's insecurity. Sometimes people they don't feel secure in their job.
Totally.
They are like, well, I'm the boss. I'm going to act like the boss. They need to know I'm the boss, because deep down inside, I don't feel like I'm the boss. I know I'm not the boss. I know I'm not qualified to be the boss, but this is what I think a boss acts like.
That is the one constant that I always encountered whenever I was working in the industry, was everyone was so insecure when I was around. And I didn't really think I was that hot shot. I was just like, I'm just going to work hard, get my stuff done on time, and be great to work with. But so many people would be trying to sabotage me and spreading rumors about me because they felt insecure and inadequate when I was around. Like whenever I'd just be, walking around, just minding my own business, just out the corner of my eye, I just see people just like staring at me, just like out of fear. And it's like I hadn't done a goddamn thing. I just was doing my work. And that happened everywhere. That happened with directors I worked with.
Oh my God. It seems like it's too lax. I mean, they would have hated me because I'm corporate East Coast corporate background. I'd be like, get the fucking work done. I don't care about your personal problems. That
was my attitude. And for some reason, it just made things worse. And so they would just do everything they could to just make my life a living hell. And so part of the reason why my resume is so long as it is because I would work on productions and it would get to that stage where they would pair me up with a director who just had it in for me. And so I was just like, the only two options you have is to either put up with it or get the hell out of that situation. And I was just like, well, I can't put up with this. This is impossible to put up with. He's going to destroy me anyway. So I should just nope out right now. And I hated doing it because, it's very hard to leave a production and then get onto another one because everyone's vying for spots. You know what I mean? It's like first in, best dressed, so to say, when a production starts up. And again, it's like, I was lucky in the sense that, my work was good enough that occasionally I would get a recruiter calling me up and say, hey, you want to come work on this thing? I'd be like, right. Yeah. But again, it's like, it's such a bizarre industry in that the only way you can work in the industry now is if you know somebody who works in the industry and they can vouch for you, which I think is complete BS, because then it means that you cannot bring in new blood and new ideas, and you need new blood and new ideas in order to revitalize an industry like animation. But it seemed to be like the strange slow motion car crash where they were just like, you know what, knowing who our audience is, we don't need to do that. Knowing trying to find new talent, we don't need to do that. We can just find whatever is pre-approved and then just roll with it. And now here we are. So
yeah, so let's talk if we can segue, and we can always go back to stuff later if you think it's relevant to where we're at now. I'm noticing that era of Western animation, I guess I'd call it the Tumblr era. Some people call it CalArts era. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think CalArts is a whole nother thing. I would call the Tumblr era beginning with probably Adventure Time. That whole era is ending. It's over.
I would disagree with that. I would say, I agree. It's maybe it's ending, and I hope it's ending. I would say the Tumblr era probably started around 2016.
Okay, so you're saying that things got from your point of view, things got really bad, really toxic around 2016.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I first came to the industry, it was, I guess you could call it the honeymoon phase. It was everything that I had expected it to be. There was merit. People did know when, like, the thing is, you talk about, knowing who your audience is and why families just kind of upped and left, right? Because they stopped getting catered to. Like, the first thing I learned when I went to animation school and learned animation was the first thing you must know is, before you make anything, who is your intended audience? Yeah. Because then you have to tailor it towards their tastes. But it's, as you said, it's like somehow something happened and they just decided to throw that rule book out the window. And, I don't know, it reeks of hubris. And I don't know why they did it. But again, it's like, it wasn't like that when I was working on Ben 10 and I think Ninja Turtles soon afterwards.
Yeah, because there still were good shows, but and I'm not even saying that these Tumblr era shows are necessarily bad. I'm saying I think that they misunderstood who it seemed like they're making kind of the same thing that happened with comic books, where they were making product for themselves and their friends.
Exactly. Yeah.
20-something, 30-something childless hipster friends, but they're making cartoons for kids, or at least they're using the platform. So I'm like, who exactly, again, at the top signed off? Because anybody that knows anything about animation or demographics or marketing or whatever would be like, okay, where's the potential for toys? Where's the potential for theme parks? Where's the potential for, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Well, here's the other thing. Yeah, this is me criticizing the executives now. The thing you got to understand about animation executives is that they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
They wanted to be in live action, and this was their consolation prize because they couldn't cut the mustard. Like, what was the
Siberia?
Yeah, do you know what was the name of the guy who was heading up Disney TVA? It's not Eric Homan, but it sounds like Eric Homan.
Oh, shit, why'd you ask me that?
I don't know. I thought you might know, but there was
yeah. No, there was a guy who was there like during the JetX era, and then he wasn't there very long. He actually got gone.
Well, he was there while I was there, and he's since left. And when he left,
they all leave. Yeah,
he left to become like a lower executive at some live action studio somewhere, right? He was They only ever see working in the animation industry as a stepping stone to a bigger career somewhere else. And so, already they're coming in. They don't really care. They just need to make sure that they maintain whatever it is that they've been handed at that time up until a certain point where they can jump ship and go to something more lucrative like live action somewhere.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's kind of like comics too. It feels like a lot of the people working in the comic book industry don't want to be in the comic book industry. They either want to be writing real books, or most of them want to work in Hollywood.
Yeah,
that's they think that Hollywood is glamorous. But I'm like, these companies you want to work for, Disney in particular started out as an animation company. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a bad thing. But it wasn't Eric Coleman, was it?
I think it was Eric Coleman. Yeah,
Eric Coleman.
Right.
Okay, that's who I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
Well,
but I know that
because I always got him confused with Eric Homan, who was
who
was the head of Frederator.
Yeah,
we also met.
Yeah. So he was a guy who got Adventure Time picked up. Yeah, and he was Fred's right hand man, and he's actually from Pennsylvania. Because I had a very lengthy conversation with him one time about that being from Pennsylvania. I don't even know what happened. I don't even think he's there anymore. I don't think he's been there for a long time.
I don't know what happened to it either. But he was the one that headed up. He spearheaded Bee and Puppycat.
Yeah.
Well. That's how I met him, because Natasha I was friends with Natasha Allegri at the time.
Yeah,
and she wanted to bring me in to do boards, and that's how I met him. But I always got him confused with Eric Coleman, because their last names sounded so similar and they have the same name.
Yeah, he was, we had I don't think we ever really went into it with people, but we actually were part of Frederator's MCM for a while. Before this channel, we had another channel. And we pitched to them before. I talked to him at length, and we talked about, being from Pennsylvania, but it was interesting because he kind of was like saying without saying that, like, and this would have been probably 2013, 2014, but he said that the industry, the tastes were changing. It's kind of his way of saying it. And he's kind of like, what would have been greenlit, 5 years ago now is not necessarily what's going to be greenlit going forward. And, he seemed like he wasn't really too terribly sure where things were going to go.
I guess he knew what was going to happen.
I don't know. I kind of wonder. But the interesting thing about that, because, with Adventure Time, is I remember Fred, we do these calls or whatever, and people would ask him about Adventure Time all the time. One, he didn't want Adventure Time greenlit. I know that. They really had to be talked into it, because he's like, it's too damn weird. It's not gonna work. And he was a big, they both were big Butch Hartman fans.
Oh, wow.
I remember. Yeah, because he got his work done, and he was a professional. And regardless of what you think about him, his religious beliefs or whatever, that problem people have with him now, they're like, he got his work done. He was a worker. He was a hard worker. I mean, sure, and he's still selling shows as well. But they're just persecuting him now, and Twitter doesn't have to like you. Actually, sometimes it works your benefit for Twitter not to like you.
Well, great. Well, where's my truck load of money then? Where the fuck is it?
Back up the Brinks truck. But I remember Fred. He was like, they were asking about Adventure Time, and he'd get kind of like, he was very guarded in what he would say, but he would always say the first 3 or 4 seasons were a good show, and then he would just kind of like, trail off, because that's when Pendleton noped out or whatever the hell was going on.
So things got weird. So the thing that happened with that was, I think, again, as I said, I've got nothing against Penn, but I think it was just way too much for him. I think he experienced burnout, and he basically handed over the reins to Adam Muto. And that's when everything changed on Adventure Time. That's when it became the existential, like, crying and
oh god, it was
agonizing over who's Finn's new girlfriend is, and they break up because Adam Muto broke up with his girlfriend, and oh god, it was
that's a lot of, like, I can see this. I would not work in the industry very well, because I'd be like, look, you want to do that? Wattpad is your friend. You go over there, you write your shit on Wattpad, you get it out of your system. We're making shows to sell to a network. To make money, to sell toys, to pay your ass. Okay, but would you like to make money? Yeah. Okay.
The problem was the hiring practices.
Yeah.
Penn was specifically hiring, what would you call them, zinesters?
Yeah, it was basically, because that's what it felt like. Like, I mean, it was cool at first, but like every show felt like a webcomic or something. And Tumblr, actually, people don't realize Tumblr came from Frederator. Tumblr was Yeah, it was David, what's his name, was Fred's intern, and he gave him a bunch of money. So it's Fred's fault that Tumblr happened.
Fred.
Yeah, he gave him a bunch of money, and this kid was like, oh my god, 18 or not. He like dropped out of high school, and Fred gave him a bunch of money, I guess, and that's how the Tumblr got started, and he sold for like $1 billion to Yahoo. Wow. And then they ran it into the ground. But that's why all these animators were parking it on Tumblr.
Yeah, I was on Tumblr back in the
day. Everybody was on Tumblr.
Yeah. And that was actually how I got my initial fan base initially, and then I lost it. But and thankfully, thank God, because I definitely wouldn't want that. Definitely wouldn't want those people as fans anymore.
No.
But what was I going to say? I forgot. Anyway,
I'm sorry I derailed you. I do.
It's fine. It happens a lot. My memory is terrible. But no, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, the hiring practices. So yeah, he was hiring all these Tumblr people. But here's my other bizarre theory, Neon. I think the reason why Adventure Time was as popular as it was. I mean, it was popular, but it was really popular. And I think part of that was because he was going to places like LiveJournal and Tumblr and hiring specific artists who had large followings. Because then, if he hired them, that person would go to their large followings and say, hey, I'm working on Adventure Time now. Maybe you should tune in. And that added to the numbers.
Okay.
Does that sound right to you?
That does, because there was a time where executives, right or wrong, equated social media followings with like your numbers matter more than your skill, and people were getting there are some people I know who got their gigs based on their platform numbers or social media numbers. In fact, back in the day when we were agented, our agent told us that your social media follower count was like the first thing that they looked at.
Yeah,
when you're pitching a project, whether it's a comic book or a show or whatever. Like if you're not this high, you're not going to get on the ride. They're not even going to look at you. It doesn't matter how talented you are. If you've only got like 2,000 subs or something, they're not even going to pay attention to you.
Yeah. So that's basically how the death of meritocracy started. Is that now all these executives aren't looking at the potential of someone in front of them. They're just looking at what is already established, because they're late. They're lazy now. They just they don't want to take risks. They don't want to risk their job. They don't want to risk their stature. And so they just want something that's already been proved that they can sort of just either buy or just take and appropriate and then imbue it into their own thing so that they can, on paper, it all looks great. Oh, you're doing all these great numbers? That's amazing. Nobody asks where those numbers came from. Nobody wonders how it came about. They just go ahead with it.
Yeah. And we're finding out that, a lot of times you can have 100,000 Twitter followers. It doesn't mean, one, that they're all real, because for the longest time, it's very, very easy to fake those follower accounts. Or two,
especially after the story you just told me.
Yeah, we got a little inside baseball into one particular showrunner. But yeah, but it was very, very easy to buy followers to build up that platform, so you could go pitch a show and be like, well, look, they have 100,000 here and they got 500,000 over here and they got whatever. Do those people buy books? Do they buy merchandise? Are they going to buy anything? In fact, some of the biggest people working in Hollywood have very little social media presence. It's very weird. Like, they're not on Twitter all the time. Some of the biggest decision makers are not on Twitter, or if they are, they might only have like 1,000 people follow them, because nobody knows who they are, because they're not out on social media making noise all the time. But that doesn't necessarily translate into sales or how marketable a show is or whatever. And I think that there are a lot of decisions made based solely on social media presence. I mean, we saw it even with YouTube, right? We had like the Fred movie and the Annoying Orange TV show and all this stuff. And they're huge on YouTube, but that doesn't mean that like general audiences or you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't mean that those people are going to, those ideas that work on YouTube are going to translate to a show on cable. And I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen with Mr. Beast's show on Amazon. Because $100 million, right? $100 million for him to start this. And I'm like, I don't know. Is grandma going to watch it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you think about it, well, I mean, Mr. Beast, I feel, is like one of those outlier cases where he just grinded like crazy and he just continued to add more and more spectacle. But anyway,
I don't know. I think that it's kind of like that's a whole nother thing. We'll have to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, that is a whole.
I got some inside baseball about that one too.
Oh,
but yeah. So the state of animation right now, though, is I'm seeing all these showrunners, former showrunners, out of work, looking for work. Ray Rodriguez is on.
The one I already tweeted.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put Ray in the crosshairs or anything over High Guardian Spice.
No, let's do it. I mean, the thing is like, we know why these people got given these silver spoons or these keys to whatever the heck, right? They got handed these things on a silver platter, and it's because they ticked all the right boxes, right?
Yeah. I mean, look. I mean, I think it's safe to say that there were a lot of people that jumped line because they were given opportunities that traditionally you would have to work your way up through the ranks. That doesn't matter if you're a straight white guy or a gay black woman or whatever. You had to work your way through the ranks. And now we have people that are like 22 to 25 years old that barely have any experience in the animation industry, literally being plucked off of Tumblr and given millions of dollars to play with, to do a fanfic with. And it fails catastrophically. And everybody's like, what the hell happened? We don't understand. They're big on Tumblr. I don't understand.
Well, that was the thing, Neon. Like, I did that. I paid my dues. I worked my way through it. And I nearly had my own show. And at the last minute, they pulled the rug out from under me. Like,
yeah. And
we won't get into it, but what you're saying rings true. It's like if people jump the line, sure, they might get ahead of the line, but the problem is everybody else in that line gets pushed back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's not, again, that's the death of meritocracy. Meritocracy is in place so that those who are the most skilled and most talented are put in the proper positions that they need to get into to put out the best product. And when you have organizations like Women in Animation, whose only mandate is to reach 50-50 parity across all creative fields by 2025, you're not adding more seats to the table. You're basically just you're trying to remove seats from a shrinking table.
Okay, so let's talk about. I do know that we have some longtime followers of ours who have a huge, and one of them, woman in particular, has a huge issue with women in animation. I do know that it was Women in Animation that pushed Crunchyroll into making some very poor decisions with their originals. They could have had original anime.
Yeah,
that was gonna. And instead, they did more Cartoon Network style Tumblr shows with that money, including High Guardian Spice and what was the really bad CGI show that they did? It was
Genlock.
Oh no, it was like a Rooster Teeth. It was that was Rooster Teeth, and they burned down too. That was a whole nother thing.
Oh yeah.
God, what was it called? Something. I can't. It was so forgettable, but it was really, really bad. It was like they looked like PS1 graphics, and clearly, like whatever budget they had set aside for Crunchyroll originals was not going into the production. I think it was like I don't know if they were skimming off the top or what, but
Margaret Dean totally embezzled that money, dude.
Yeah, she was in charge of that whole endeavor, and they did. I know when High Guardian Spice happened, that like their pitch for the show wasn't like, here's what the show's about. It was like, here are the people working on the show and the kinds of people we have working on the show. Here's a little bit of concept art. Yeah, right. It was like, here's a little bit of concept art, but mostly here are the people and the diverse people. And most of those people, now I know like Kate Leth is going back to comics or something. Like I'm seeing a lot of these people that rode in on this wave not getting work now. So where is Women in Animation in this? Are they still like a thing? Or
totally. All right, yeah. So I have a huge axe to grind with this. They're essentially the Sweet Baby Inc. of animation.
Okay.
In my opinion, or the BLM of animation, whichever you want to shoot. Pick your poison.
Right.
But essentially, Women in Animation, or WEA for short, it's basically its whole business model. It's a non-profit. Its whole business model is basically a reputation protection racket. So basically,
like Sweet Baby Inc. Okay,
sort of. But the way that because I've been looking at them for a very long time. But the way women in animation works is that, they have their members who are mostly women. There are men in there as well. And, I hope there's a certain circle of hell reserved for those guys.
But what do you really think? Okay, you could be honest.
I'm only ever being honest with you, Neon, which is why I'm so unhinged. But essentially, they come out with this mandate of like, we need more women to work in animation if you want your company to be successful. And this was literally a quote from a female executive at one of the big studios. She literally said at Annecy 2019 Animation Festival, where they had this huge panel, Women in Animation had this huge panel, and all the panelists were up there were women. They were all executives at like Sony Animation and Nickelodeon and all these other places.
Right.
And they're all just sitting up there agreeing with each other, going, oh, yeah, we need more women. And one of them was like, well, if you want your studios to succeed, you need to hire more women. As if somehow hiring more women will magically make your product better.
Qualified women?
No, not qualified women.
Oh, no, we don't. Okay.
Just women. If you've got a vagina, or if you say you have a vagina, then we want you. You need to be a director. And they had this... another thing they had was a a mentorship program, which I'm surprised that's not a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, because they would basically take young women and pair them with studio veterans who are mostly men, and they would teach them the ways how to do it. I'm just like, I'm surprised nothing has happened.
Yeah,
or maybe something has happened and we just didn't hear about it. And
I would not be. Let's just say in this particular climate, I don't know if I would be particularly comfortable with that.
Oh yeah. So anyway, they do stuff like that, and so when they're doing this and they're pushing this and they're approaching studios, they say, hey, you guys aren't bad guys. You're all about equality, when really it's about equity. Maybe if you become a sponsor, maybe we won't be saying anything bad about you. It's a nice studio you have here. It'd be a shame if people all of a sudden thought you were all bad guys. And that's how they get sponsors. And if you go to their webpage and you look at their sponsors list, it's basically almost every single major animation studio, including studios like Powerhouse, including, studios like Titmouse, smaller studios, as well as studios. And it's a protection racket, and you can tell because you go to their website. They've got different chapters all over the country and all over the world. And any particular using Powerhouse as a particular test case, you go to the Austin chapter, and you see these three women, and I've been tracking that as well. You see these three particular women that they've sort of got profiles for. And when they first started, they weren't directors at, say, Powerhouse and BioWare and other satellite studios they have there. But now, all of a sudden, magically, they've been promoted to director and, head of story or something, because, in my opinion, they come up and they're like, hey, we're members of WEA. It'd be a shame if you didn't promote us. And because if you didn't promote us, then, we might have to let everybody know that your company's really shit and that you won't be getting any more contracts from, the major studios anymore.
So... That's interesting. You mentioned Powerhouse, because there was a definite beyond the Masters of the Universe Revelation situation where Tila winds up with a side shave, and she's very, very close friends with this new Andra character that shows up. It's never been mentioned before. She was like in one mini comic or something way back
years ago.
That's how I just it latched onto that. There was definitely a change with Castlevania. So Castlevania, when it first started, was excellent. And we had Warren Ellis as the showrunner or lead writer. Of course, Warren Ellis, after how many years, suddenly finds himself in the middle of accused of using his male influence over wannabe comic writers and animation people, whatever. And then whoopsie doopsie, he's fired from Castlevania. And then the new season of Castlevania, which I was actually excited about, because I'm like, oh, good, we're finally going to have a series about Richter Belmont. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're not going to have a series about Richter Belmont.
Well, we did eventually, but it sucked.
So there definitely is a shift in focus in Powerhouse. And I've always admired them. I mean, I want to be clear,
yeah.
like even during the He-Man debacle, like I could admit that as much as I hated the direction they were taking the He-Man, legacy IP in, the animation was good, the character designs were good. Powerhouse did what it could do based on what it had to work with. Now the Sailor Moon transformation of He-Man, I don't know about that one, but like they do good work. They do solid work, but there definitely is a change. It feels like something's different at Powerhouse.
Oh, definitely. And that's probably what it is. It's like the Mafia, they've come in and they've implied a threat to their future business. I forget who it is that owns Powerhouse, but I used to know Patrick Stannard, who was a director at Powerhouse. He's since cut off contact with me because when they found out I was doing freelance for him, they had a little talk with him and said, why are you giving this guy work? And I didn't hear from him again. But yes, no, I agree. Like on a technical level, Powerhouse is absolutely phenomenal. It's like their work is so good. But the thing that I'm talking about is on a storytelling and conceptual level. Like the He-Man series was absolutely horrible storytelling. And this is coming from a guy whose first toys that he had when he was a kid were the He-Man toys, right? Like it was like that and Voltron and then Transformers. And, we won't get too much into it because obviously it's getting into more bigger stuff, but this is sort of the pattern that is happening in culture right now. I mean, He-Man is a perfect example because he's literally called He-Man. And he's a man. He's big and muscular and he's strong and he's supposed to fight for truth and justice and for his friends. And
can't have that because those
can't
are
have
bad,
that. You
bad
cannot.
Things.
Boys cannot be allowed to have positive role models anymore because it's all toxic masculinity now.
Well, Doctor Who. Look at Doctor Who.
Yeah, he's twerking monsters away. Look at that guy.
I mean, seriously. First we turn him into a woman, and then now he's twerking the monsters away. Like,
exactly.
I mean, but he was always yes, the Doctor changed, and he was always kind of a bit on the aloof side. But he was kind of like your crazy uncle or your crazy grandfather. But he was always a role model, and I remember Peter Davison. He got in trouble for this. The Fifth Doctor. He got in trouble for saying that it's a shame boys don't have role models anymore because we had to turn the Doctor into a woman, and they blasted him. And he doesn't talk much about it. I don't think anymore. He's not allowed to. And
but I mean, it's But anyway, getting back to what we were originally talking about. I totally agree. Like I was an OG like Doctor Who fan before it even came to the States. Living in Australia, we got all the BBC programming all the time. But no, I mean like He-Man, like that's the thing. I don't know why they're doing it to Superman. They're turning him into this My Adventures with Superman. Is that what
My Adventures with Superman? Yeah. Like
they've turned him into this soft, weak little, pussy who just gets beat up all the time. And, he just puts up with Lois's manipulation because she's acting like a selfish bitch and nobody calls her out on it. And I don't know why they are so adamant. Well, I mean, I partly know why. I think it's all by design.
Yeah.
It's all about demoralizing and degrading and destroying men and what they stand for, because it's men that build the cities, they build the infrastructure. They fight our wars, and the elite. We're getting into crazy shit. I'll end it here. In my opinion, I think the elites really they're scared to death of men because they themselves are absolutely weak cowards as well. Because they're doing everything they can to, I guess, kneecap and destroy the next generation of young men who are coming up that we are going to need in order to keep our society running. But I'll end it there. We'll get back to the culture.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, because, I mean, you look at it and I'm like, you look at the current climate just in animation, and I'm like, anybody that knows anything about Walt Disney knows he was kind of a man's man. I mean, he was definitely, he was a product of his time, but like him and his brother, they were, they were businessmen. They were creative. He was tough as nails. Nobody told Walt no. They were terrified. Exactly. They had a love-hate relationship with him, and people that worked with him that were in his inner circle, like Rolly Crump, thought the world of Walt. But he was also, kind of came from almost a military. I think Rolly was in the service, but so Walt was like his general. Like he was like the guy, but he always knew what he wanted to do next. He always had plans. He always had, plans upon plans and schemes upon schemes. But he always
I don't think he had schemes, but he definitely
no. But well, I don't know. Florida was kind of a scheme, I think. But
well,
it worked out. It worked out in the end. He didn't get to see it, but yeah, like so much of the stuff that people are working on right now, it's like that the personalities that built these things would not be allowed to work in the industry today.
That is, you have no idea how true that is, Neon, because I'm living proof of that. Like people who know me personally, have worked with me, would say that I'm not an agreeable man, and any guy who's worth his salt is not going to be agreeable, because part of being a man means sticking to your guns, sticking to your convictions, because you know which way we have to go. And when two men have two different views, the way we work it out is either through fisticuffs or through negotiation. And that's just how men are built, right? And And at the end of the day, when we're done beating the shit out of each other, we laugh and we pat each other on the back and we buy each other beers. That's just how men bond. But let me finish. For some reason, something has happened where now we know what the reason is. Weak men have decided to hand over their balls and their power to women who hate disagreeable men, and they hate men in general. And so guys like me who are like, this isn't right at all, narcissistic and psychopathic women have decided, well, we can't compete with men on a physical level because men have a lot of physical power, whereas women have a lot of social power. And so they do what, narcissistic psychopathic women do. They use reputation destruction through accusation, gossip and all this other stuff. And men in general don't know how to combat that. I mean, there is a way to do it. You just say, fuck off, bitch, and get lost. And
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've gotten very, very good at that over the last couple years.
I think and the problem is, there are a lot of the men who work in the animation industry today are all weak men. I can guarantee you that, because they're all scared. They're all cowards. They're too afraid to say no to these bitches. And they're too afraid to take any action, partly because they do have families. And I partly understand that. Yeah. But the problem is it's a slow death, right? If you don't take any action, you're basically saying, well, I'm just more than happy to see the industry die and my career die along with it. It's just going to burn to the ground.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of saw what happens when you do stick to your guns. I mean, John Lasseter got, let's talk about John Lasseter, because John Lasseter got pushed out of Disney for nebulous allegations. I don't even know what the hell why he was fired exactly. Just, he hugs people and, stuff, but they didn't shit can him. They left him right out of his contract, and then he got gone, and they're like, he's never going to work in animation again, ever.
Oh yeah.
So he's over at Skydance after, I think it was Paramount. He was going to work at Paramount first, and they had a shit fit, and then he wound up over at Skydance. But didn't he take like half the Disney animators with him? They had that much, including women. Now, if this guy was such a predator, why did all these women go to work for him?
I mean, that's a good question. The story about the Lasseter ousting is a really interesting one, because I've heard a lot of different stories from people who've worked with him directly, who worked at Pixar. And the picture they paint about him isn't a favorable one, but that's beside the point. I don't, even if, again, he's a disagreeable guy, right? But in his disagreeableness, he built Pixar. He made some of the best pitches that in their catalog. But the thing that once he got ousted and then he got rehired by Skydance, the day when that news broke, Margaret Dean sent out a letter to all the WEA members.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that. She
trying to reassure everybody. Yeah, trying to reassure everybody that even though this has happened, they are still in control. I still have that email, and it is absolutely insane to read. The fact that she took the time to do that shows that their operation isn't legitimate. It's all about lining her own pockets and some of her little cronies as well. It's a complete farce, just like BLM, just like Sweet Baby Inc. And the sooner that these people get taken to court or the whole thing craters, is the sooner the entire industry can start to turn around and start making money again.
Okay, so that's gonna take me to where I want to end this video, because this is where we're at. Fast forward to current year, all this shit's going down, whatever.
Yeah,
they've turned the money off on a lot of these productions. A lot of these people, like I said, Rebecca Sugar's out there. I don't know her. I don't know if she's nice, not nice. I have no idea, but she's out there selling audio CDs. She's not running a show.
She was nice, but again, she changed as a person. I saw it like a werewolf. I saw her change and transform.
Again, well, sometimes what happens, I always tell people that, the biggest bullies are people that maybe were bullied themselves and they overcompensate. And so you get people that maybe they were outcasts in society, then they get into the animation, then they have a little bit of power, and then they just kind of go crazy.
Yeah,
but
they get drunk.
It happens in comics too.
Oh, totally.
But like, they turn the money off. Netflix turn the money off on these Tumblr shows. Cartoon Network, what the hell is even going on? They left the building in Burbank, right? They're I don't know if you saw the video we did, if you were aware of it. MeTV is basically making a new Cartoon Network, like the OG Cartoon Network.
I don't think it's a new Cartoon Network. I think it's basically just going to be a streaming platform where they can stream old shows that they've done for their catalog and maybe get some kind of advertising money. It's they're not making anything new. It's just reruns of the old catalog
for now. But that's how Cartoon Network started. And then after a couple of years, when it was making money, they're like, let's do some new stuff. And they actually said that the guy from Cartoon Brew was going to work with them on some new content.
Oh god!
So I'm like, I don't know what that, but so look, this is just my personal observation outside looking in. It looks to me like how they're correcting the problem in animation is they're outsourcing it. We're getting more and more, anime. We're seeing them outsourced to other countries.
Oh yeah.
We're sidestepping and they're going to say, well, it's macroeconomic circumstances. It's like, no, because we're not going to pay you to make a Tumblr fanfic that's going to put us in the hole and then have to pay, with the union and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. Dude, I could talk. Yeah, that's part of the other thing, because I think you did a video many, many years ago about when Nickelodeon started setting up studios over in Japan, didn't you?
That sounds familiar. I know that they started.
I remember this distinctly because, on one hand, Hollywood is absolutely scared shitless about anime, but on the other hand, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the situation, right? In American animation, you have the Animation Guild, which basically they negotiate the group negotiation of contracts, and that includes increased pay. When I was in the guild, I was making so much money; it was crazy. But the flip side to that is that their budgets are completely out of control. I think there was a comparison where anime budgets is like $100,000 per episode or something, whereas say an episode of Adventure Time was like $300,000. It's like 3 times the price, right? And so in my mind, I think they're basically these studios looking at everything. They're seeing how anime is basically going mainstream now, and they're like, well, we could either do work here where we got to pay a whole bunch of money to a bunch of losers who don't know how to make good stuff and can barely draw, or we could go overseas to Japan where they have a highly trained workforce who have no rights, they have no union, they get paid pennies, and their work is incredibly phenomenal. It's so incredibly beautiful to look at, and the kids love it. So, as a business decision, I understand why they're doing that. But at the same time, Margaret Dean, who was in charge of Crunchyroll at one point, they want to control it. That's why there's this issue still. I don't know if it's still happening, but issue with localizers inserting their own of ideology into the translations because they want to control it. But the problem is that there's a cultural barrier because Japan is very insular, even more insular than America. But there's also a language barrier that they can't get over because most Americans don't speak Japanese.
Yeah, but they're stepping over again. They're stepping over the people. The problem is self-correcting, I think. I mean, it took a while. It basically took the free money. Because from my point of view, I'm looking at all these end runs that are basically being made now. And I've heard from people, and I don't want to out anybody, but I've had some people pass along some information from some animation discords where there are animators out there, and they're like, the work just stopped. It's drying up. There's nothing. Nobody's greenlighting anything, or they're picking up shows from overseas, or they're sending the work overseas completely, bypassing us, because people don't realize, like, a lot of times the storyboards are done over here and then they ship them over to Korea or whatever.
Oh yeah, I should have told that. That was like the majority of my work.
yeah. So that's typically how it's been done for a while. The days of, like, having a whole crew of animators working in Burbank, doing all the in-betweens and stuff, that hasn't been a thing really, other than Disney, for a while. But like, they said they're just cutting us out of the equation. They're basically cutting us out of the equation. They're like, damn it, this is about the union. They're like, yeah, pretty much, because they're like, they're saying they can't afford us. And I'm like, I think that's partially true. I think they're using it as an excuse. I think they're like, I mean, we technically could afford you, but you're all pain in the ass to work with.
Well, the other thing is that you have to understand about the union is basically the union has become like an enforcement arm for WEA.
Yeah.
Because the union, it was just recent. I think it was this year or last year that the union ratified to become national.
Yes, well. I remember that, because they hit, because I think like Powerhouse and Titmouse joined or something. Because I know a lot of the Texas studios.
Well, Titmouse had always been a part of the union.
Oh, they were okay.
Well, they have like Titmouse had like a subsidiary company which was non-union, which they called Robin Redbreast or something, just for the occasional project that, for whatever reason, they couldn't go union.
Okay.
But yeah, Powerhouse, that was the main thing why they did that, because we didn't really have any purchase in place in the rest of the country back then. And what happened was, Castlevania popped off. It was really popular. Mm-hmm. And so WEA was like, why aren't we in control of this studio? How dare they become successful without our permission? and so now now you've seen it. Like, the union went national. Yeah. The president of the union is a member of WEA, Janet Marino King, and a lot of the head members of the union are WEA members as well. So basically, the union has been co-opted by WEA also, and they basically use it to enforce whatever mandates that they want to have in there. And all the males who still pay into the union are basically paying into a system that's going to put them out of work, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I mean, the solution to that is you are non-union, you just produce your content, and you find another distribution channel. I mean, the Hollywood system is crumbling.
Oh, yeah. I hope the whole place gets nuked from orbit, personally.
Oh, I think it's going to. I mean, we just did a video today. We haven't put it up yet, but talking about how there really aren't any good-looking box office prospects other than Deadpool and Wolverine. This year, there's like nothing coming out, and theaters are going to crumble. And it's like I hope that strike was worth it, because of the strikes, we have a year without content, which is going to cripple Hollywood.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's almost like it's the same pattern as, say, when they did the strikes at Kickstarter. Remember that?
Yeah. And then people got gone. So, I mean, maybe I'm being naive, and I probably am being naive, but I'm cautiously optimistic that on the other side of this, I think we will have the opportunity to return to making merit-based works, because I think the economics will self-correct the situation.
I will agree. You are being naive.
Okay.
So I'll give my take on what happens on the other side.
Okay.
So there is some good news. The good news is that there is starting to be an explosion of independent animation, which is great. One channel in particular, actually a channel started by two Australian guys, funnily enough, called Glitch. They've been producing the what is it called? The Digital Circus, I think it's called.
Oh yeah, no, that's awesome. I didn't do a video. People were asking why I didn't cover that. I'm like, well, I probably should.
Yeah, so I think episode 2 just came out. It's really, really. I mean, it's CG, but it's really well made. Like, good story, good characters, and you had Long Gone Gulch, which was done by Tara Billinger and Zach Bellissimo, that everybody really liked. There's this upsurge of independent animation, and I think what's going to happen is, once we come out on the other end of this, these companies are going to be wondering, well, we need new stuff. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do? And it's what we talked about before. They're going to go to, the independent animation places or wherever independent animation is, they're going to look at the numbers. They're going to look at Long Gone Gulch and see that it's got 1.4 million views and all these upvotes and all this positive press and other things like The Amazing Digital Circus. And they'll be like, well, I mean, the numbers don't lie. And they're just going to offer them, a fat contract. They'll buy the IP from them. And that's going to be the new model moving forward, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the way it works everywhere now. Music and, like we said, about YouTubers getting TV deals and stuff like that. And I think that, I still think at the end of it that the old studio system and even like the unions and stuff like that will become less and less necessary. But like, my wife and I were talking about, like, we're actually eligible to join SAG-AFTRA. They've actually... I'm not even kidding. Like,
why would you do that?
I never would because they wanted people like us to join SAG-AFTRA to shut us up. And because we were not allowed to talk about media, we were supposed to do the blackout with them during the strikes and all this. And I'm like, fuck off. Like, hell no.
Totally. Yeah.
And what do? You take a cut of and what do we get for that? You take a cut of our income and we get what exactly?
Nothing.
Well, you get creator tools and you get, we'll have your back. Okay. It's like, you're never going to let us into Hollywood. We're not going to get a late night talk show. What the hell are you talking about? You're not going to do shit for us. We had a Hollywood agent. They didn't do shit for us.
Yeah.
So you're not going to. So that's, kind of my take too, is I think it is going to be a rise of independence and then just like imported stuff, or people are just going to watch older, better stuff on repeat forever because
that's happening.
Top the classics,
Yeah. I mean, aren't they rescreening like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy or something?
I think so. I think they were this year. I know that, we're having a lot of animation come back to theaters, which I think is really cool. But theaters are desperate. I mean, they're desperate for new content, and that's not sustainable either. I mean, that whole thing is going to blow up. But every indicator, whether it's cartoons or video games or comic books or TV shows or whatever, is that people are going back and watching the old stuff because they don't like the new content.
Well, I mean, they could have had good new content.
Yeah, they could have.
No.
No, we can't do that.
We can't let Fresher Luke start a show. Nah. It might be too good and make us look bad. We can't have that. We need to be in the limelight.
So we're going to wrap this one up, dude. It's been a great conversation. Definitely have to get you back on. Where can people find you? Obviously, Twitter. You're
obviously Twitter. At Fresher Luke. And I have a Ko-Fi called Esoteric Skull. I mean, this is a podcast. I don't think you can put the link in the chat.
I can put the link in the description. All
right. Then let me just post it here. But yeah, you can find me on Ko-Fi. I do have a YouTube channel. I haven't touched that thing in a year because something weird's happening with YouTube.
Well, that's a conversation we can have after the show. Yeah, there's definitely something weird going on YouTube.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm mostly on Twitter. I basically have limited my social media activity just for mental health reasons.
Smart man.
Yeah, well, I had to. I really had to. It was really destroying me. I used to stream, but it was just too bad. But those are two places you can find me. I've got a bunch of projects happening that are coming up that I can't really talk about, but I will say one of them was for a client whose name rhymed with Jam Clyde.
Okay. That narrows it down.
Does it?
Sure.
And other stuff. But animation takes time. So hopefully it'll be released either this year or next year. And of course, I've got my own comics that I'm doing, like Forsaken Gods, Volume 2. Trying to finish. Something Man, issue 1 is for sale on my Ko-Fi in digital form if you want to buy that. Tree Fitty. And that's me.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, guys. Please subscribe wherever you found this podcast. If it's on Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, I don't know where it is. They put it all over the place. Thank you very much for listening. As always, check out the main Clownfish TV YouTube channel. Go to clownfishtv.com, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Stay fresh.
Thanks again for listening. More news and videos are available on our website at www.clownfishtv.com and on our YouTube channel, Clownfish TV. You can buy official merchandise, Clownfish comic books, and more at shopclownfish.com. If you like this show, please consider subscribing and leaving us a positive review on iTunes and other podcast platforms. If you're looking to help support this show financially, go to clownfishsupport.com. If you'd like to sponsor an episode of this show, send us an email at business@webreef.io. This podcast is a production of Clownfish Studios, LLC and Web Reef Media, proudly made in Pittsburgh, USA.